how does the director, Jimmy Babbitt, use color in the set design and costuming to kind of bolster the ideas of femininity and masculinity? And do you like how this was done?
So bolster means like support, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. So I would say like kind of what we were talking about before, our main character is kind of always seen in those like pastel colors, and I think that adds to her femininity because I feel like pastel is very pure and very virginal and virtue and stuff like that and girly, and so she has those pastel colors, she has that feminine look, but she's still like a lesbian and she can be those two things at once. So I think that also, I know like all the girls have to wear pink and like all the guys wear blue, right? But I think like some of their sets that they're like shown in are like all different colors. I want to say like, I feel like maybe in the like montage where her and Megan and Graham are like they're like cleaning stuff or something together, the background is like a different color, so and I'm not 100% sure that that's the case, but I feel like that, I think I remember the background being a different color, which is kind of like symbolic of like, yeah, they're being told they need to be straight, but they're still like gravitating towards each other and like accepting their own sexuality and going against it. So like the background, their inner vibe, inner feelings are, and then their clothes are like what the outward appearance is. So symbolism.
Yeah, I will say that I really love the set design, like the whole like it was a concentration camp.
Oh my God.
The whole conversion camp.
It's cutesy.
Oh God.
Well,
it's not cutesy.
It's not cutesy, but it's cutesy.
But like the look is cutesy.
Like all the rooms are like, oh, this room is like totally blue, or this room is like totally pink. I like how separated the colors are. Yeah. Because like in the movie, it's like, okay, well, we have to separate you now, you know, based on gender and on these gender stereotypes. And I really like it. It feels like Blue's Clues kind of meets, you know.
It reminds me of a Dr. Seuss kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like the way that everything's so like cookie cutter.
Yeah,
and especially like with the pastels, it reminds me of that.
It's interesting to me that they put all of the girls in a room together.
Yeah.
If they're lesbians. But like, wouldn't, like, kind of thinking about that now, like, wouldn't if they wanted them to be straight so bad, put them like in a room with a man, or so they like had to sleep in the same bed or something? I don't know.
Just like put them in the same room.
It's one of those things where it's like, oh, why didn't they do this? And it's like, well, there wouldn't be a movie.
True.
No, but like you were saying, like it kind of feels like a Dr. Seuss book.
Yeah.
I feel like that kind of helps it like feel like otherworldly too.
Yeah, it just feels like cartoonish and outlandish.
Yeah, and it's like I feel like that's a good like representation of kind of like what the like conversion camp kind of is. It's like this
because it's not realistic. It's not reality.
Yeah, it's not realistic. It's like that's never like doesn't actually work. Yeah, and I feel like it does a good job of kind of like representing that in a subtle way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not subtle at all, but like still, compared to other movies of the time, so this is like a 1999 film. Like, how does this film handle like queer and female issues? And did it achieve its goal of giving a voice to a queer audience or like a female audience?
I think it definitely did, because when I think of like early 2000s or like late 90s movies, you're thinking of like the teen movie.
Yeah, like high school musical.
Yeah, like teen movie where it's, you know, like She's All That and, you know, like all that stuff. And all of those, I usually just go to like either American Pie, where it's like outlandishly funny and it's all the boys club and it's funny to watch. Or it is a rom-com. Or it's a romance movie. Like like when I think of that time, I don't think of like this movie. I don't think of like the queer community being, you know, like thought of or represented. But
if
this movie,
about, like teen movie.
yes, exactly. And the fact that they made it like a teen movie, like I love, because like that's the iconic thing of like the 90s and the 2000s, and they just did that without, you know, like making it a huge, like what we talked about last episode, where it's like calling out and making it such a big deal. Yeah. But then just like throwing it in and just being like, yeah, this is normal. Yeah. And just like leaving it at that.
Sorry. I also feel like this is the only movie I can think of from that time, at least, and I could be so wrong, that like focuses on like a gay woman.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there aren't really any movies that like, at least not from like that era, that really like centered. Even now, I still can't think of any like current movies that like really center.
I was trying to think of some too. The only other movie that I can recall that I've seen from the 90s and early 2000s that is about like being gay is Velvet Goldmine, which is a movie about, which is 1998, and that was a movie about like glam rock, but it was about gay men, like gay and bi men. So it's a little bit different, but this is like, I mean, really, if I'm thinking about, especially like a female teen movie where the main girl is like grappling with her sexuality, like I can't really think of another one from that era. I can think of a lot from the current era, but
I think of the ones like from the 90s that like hurt the stereotype, where it's like the teen movie and the hot girls are changing and the boys start seeing them make out and like all this stuff, and they're like sexualizing being a lesbian. That is a very common theme in the 90s and 2000s. I actually had this conversation with like my family, because like we always butt heads on like, you know, like gender like conversations, and you know, it's that conversation that you're having with a 50-year-old man, and you're like, why is it hot that girls kiss, but when guys do it you want to turn off the TV? Because there's absolutely no difference. And it's just, and the guys are just like, you know, like, oh, but like it's girls, like they're hot. I'm like, nah. Like the fact that that was put in place, like definitely through like locker room talk and all that, I can imagine, but specifically like 90s movies, which is what they grew up watching and being like, that's hot. And just then having a realistic, not like fully realistic, because it is a little, you know, like
can't be.
So it like puts it more in like, hey, this isn't, you know, like we're not all hot and sexy and doing this just to be hot and sexy. Like I'm gay and like I'm not doing that to be like hot.
For men.
It's not, I'm not here to do that for you.
Well, in a similar vein, how does this film kind of hold up to our modern standards of representation, especially compared to movies like Bottoms that came out in like 2023, which also like stars like a lesbian duo, or even like shows like Heartstopper, which got like really popular.
I feel like Bottoms is one of my favorite movies. It's different than this one because it's not like coming to terms with your sexuality, because both of the main characters like are like out and proud lesbians like by the time the movie starts. So it's more like living as a teen lesbian woman in today's modern time. But it's less so like the journey of like figuring that out, talking to your parents, like that kind of already happens before the movie starts. With like Heartstopper, I think it definitely is more similar to this, where it's like with that, like that's a little bit more similar to the figuring out, telling your parents, going through that. But I think this movie still like holds up today. I think some of the, I mean, of course it's like dramatized and like a little exaggerated, but I think the ideas of like figuring that out, telling your parents, knowing that they might have not the best reaction, like I feel like that's still like true to today.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was gonna say. I feel like this movie is like pretty similar to Heartstopper. I almost said Hotstopper. Heartstopper, in the sense of like in both cases, it's like you have someone who's not out having to like because I feel like in Heartstopper, Nick is kind of trying to like come to terms with like he's like I'm bi, like I'm coming to terms with I'm bi, and then like But I'm a Cheerleader, she's like I'm gay, and I'm like coming to terms with I'm gay. So I feel like there are a lot of like parallels in that sense of like both of those characters are like having to come to terms with it, and then like telling their parents and kind of getting that like mixed reaction, because like in Heartstopper, Nick, his mom is like accepting, but his brother is like an asshole. But I'm a Cheerleader, it's like kind of similar things, like we have some people who are like accepting and then other people who are like so
I like the difference where it's like just the amount of representation there is, and kind of like the normalcy of it. Like in like on Heartstopper, like they have similar like themes there where it's like, oh, like they're not accepting, or it's like a coming of age kind of thing. But at the same time, it's like now like Heartstopper is not the only movie we have with that kind of like plot point.
Like a really good one. But like his parents were totally like, you know, like, oh, I mean, like the mom was, the dad
not really.
He came around, of course, but that like those movies like showing like the acceptance is like crucial too.
Yeah, and even like in Bottoms, where it's like, where it's not a coming of age story, right? Because it's like, oh, there doesn't need to be one now.
Yeah.
It's like that's just like who they are. It's normal now. Which I think is like, you know, I think back in the day, it's like definitely in 1999 they wouldn't have just made a movie where it's like, oh yeah, like I don't know, they're like fighting aliens or something, and oh, they also happen to be lesbians.
Yeah. Right? Like Bottoms, I don't think it's about them being lesbians. I think it's about them, like, well, I guess they're trying to get girls, but like I feel like that's like, it just so happens to be that they're getting girls and not guys. Like I feel like it's about like friendship too, and like I feel like also nobody like thinks it's weird that they're lesbians or like really comments on the fact they're lesbians, and even when like PJ like tries to kiss Brittany, she's like, it's not like an ew, that's gross. She's just like, oh, I'm sorry if I was like misleading you, like I'm not, like I'm straight. But it wasn't like anything like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's really like the biggest difference.
Yeah.
Just like the time periods and like what kind of representation was normalized.
Goodbye, listeners.
Yes, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next episode.
See you next episode.